Hi everyone, this is Christine Harrington, the Savvy Sales Lady, and I am back with the fabulous Simon White. And I'm going to start saying, I'm going to call this Simon White's Wisdom. Simon, because you have a lot of great tips to share with salespeople of all experience. And we're going to continue with sales mistakes to avoid. So Simon, I'll let you start with your first pick.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the intro, Christine. I think one of the big ones is not preparing for meetings. Not preparing, and it can be as simple, and there's obviously different levels of this, but one is, have you been on their website? Have you read their latest press releases? Have you looked them up on LinkedIn? Because it's something that we all should do. If you can look up the prospect on LinkedIn a day or two before the meeting, firstly, you might see if you've got some shared connections. You'll get a better handle in how long have they worked there, what's their experience, etc. But also, it gives them an alert. You've actually bothered to look. There's nothing worse than you get an alert through LinkedIn that someone's looked at your profile an hour before the meeting you're about to have with them. So do it a few days before so they get that heads up. But also preparing, what do you want from the meeting? What's the objective? What is the outcome you're trying to get from it? What questions are you going to ask? What are you likely to get asked back? What are the pain points likely to be for that kind of person in that job, in that industry? So much preparation you should do. And I heard one stat that it says if you're going to have an hour's sales meeting, you should at least prepare for at least 1 hour before and rehearse it and sort of go through it in your mind and that kind of stuff before you get there. So you don't have to rely on notes. It's there, it's prepared, and you can you've got that kind of muscle memory. It's there every time. So that's, for me, it's a big one. You've got to prepare.
When you don't prepare, Simon, when you don't prepare, then you start talking about the fish on the wall. Oh, when did you catch that fish?
Yeah.
Or you talk about the golf clubs, in the corner, because you think that is the way to build rapport during a meeting when you're first meeting a salesperson. And I used to be like that. I used to be that salesperson. And then I realized that, that really wasn't authentic. And I started into the meeting right away. As you said, being prepared, you're ready to go. And frankly, that business person, that business owner, that sales VP, they're ready to talk immediately too, because everybody's time's so limited. After you get the business out of the way, you can then chit chat about the golf clubs in the corner.
Absolutely. There's a quote that I tend to give at pretty much every training session I do on any topic, and it's, if you don't have a plan, you can only react. And when you are reacting, you're not in control. And you can use that in pretty much every sales topic training course you do. But yeah, I think it's a good one. Just have that plan and rehearse it, in your mind. And yeah, absolutely.
And you said it, and you said another thing that I thought is really important that I teach too, and that is rehearse it in your mind. So before you get into that meeting, sit in your car for 2 or 3 minutes and kind of go through it in your mind, how you visualize how this is all going to unfold. So don't walk in there cold. Okay, you've done your preparation. Now, before you go in, kind of rehearse how you visualize this is all going to move forward. And that way, you're warming yourself up, and resist taking the phone call that you get right before you walk into that meeting. Turn your phone off and ignore it and prepare yourself in your car before you walk in.
Yeah, that's great advice, Christine. Very much like if you were going on a run, you do some stretching and warm-up exercise before you did it, so you wouldn't pull a muscle and have an injury. And it's exactly the same thing with when you're having that meeting with that prospect or existing customer, or whatever the scenario. And it's also preparation prior to any phone call, any follow-up calls, any engagement you have with that customer, or also existing customers as well, because you want to grow them. and get referrals and do all the other stuff as well. So yeah, preparing for those conversations as well. I think sometimes salespeople, account managers, anyone in that kind of role doesn't always prepare enough for conversations with existing customers, because they've already got some relationship and they kind of wing it, and you can't wing it, because there's always a competitor ready to swoop in if you make a mistake.
Exactly. And you know, account managers and account executives, Simon and I know you're getting around 200 or 300 emails a day. I mean, when I was an account executive, it was not unusual for me to get 300 to 400 emails a day. So I know how you kind of resist that preparing, because you're torn in so many different directions with all the emails that, you know, everybody thinks they're the priority, and you really have to weigh who is the priority and just turn it off and set some time to just get yourself ready for that meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a dog, a Labrador, and when I walk him in the morning before going to a meeting or something, I will always, you know, for that hour of walking the dog, I will prepare the meeting in advance. And then when I come home, if I've got to do a proposal, when I go and walk the dog again, I will be running through the proposal in my mind. What am I going to say? How, you know, all that kind of stuff. So that is my kind of meditation time, where I'm kind of thinking, and it's my quiet time where I'm just walking through the lakes and through the woods and stuff with the dog, and I can shut off and just think about stuff. So, yeah.
You know what, Simon? You may not know this, but that is a mindset trick. You have anchored your process with walking the dog.
Yeah.
So let's just say for a second that it's the weekend and you don't have anything pressing and you walk the dog. Do you find yourself thinking about work?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the time when I'm not in a busy house, the phone's not ringing, you know, there's not a WhatsApp or an email. It's just me. I come up with some great ideas for LinkedIn or my website or whatever it is, or if I've got to do a talk somewhere, I can script it all in my head on that walk, and then when I come back, sit at my desk, I can just type it up or whatever the situation is. So absolutely, that really works for me. But yeah, I've got a big Labrador. I have to take him on at least 2 long walks a day, so I have a lot of thinking time. Like, I don't listen to music and stuff. It is just thinking time. So.
All right. Well, what's your next idea?
Oh, I think it's something that a lot of salespeople neglect, and a lot of sort of sales leaders neglect, and certainly in the smaller businesses, is really understanding the numbers. Not just the top numbers, not just what the target is, but what are those daily behaviors that the salesperson needs to do to hit that big number. So, you know, starting with the big number, you know, I've got to bring in £1 million a year or whatever. What does that mean? What's your average order value? You know, what is your success rate? What's your close rate? How many, you know, from how many calls result in how many meetings? From how many meetings to how many proposals? Really drill down so you understand what you have to do every day. If every day, you know, you need to make 20 phone calls, you need to send out 10 LinkedIn connection requests, you need to phone 5 lapsed customers, whatever those numbers are, understand the numbers, and really ideally understand what you have to do every day, and then that takes the pressure off yourself. Because it's very hard. It's like walking, you know, how do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. If you know you've got to bring in this big number, it's daunting, it's scary, and all of a sudden it's the end of Q1 or something, and you think, oh my goodness, I'm nowhere near that target. Drill it down, work with your managers to really understand what you've got to do daily. What are those daily behaviors? So understanding the numbers is so important, and recording the numbers. Don't just, oh yeah, I think I made 30 calls. No, what did you do? How many calls did you make? How many decision makers did you speak to? How many requested information? Whatever those numbers are, but you can only manage what you measure.
Simon, let me ask you this question. Do you find when you're coaching sales teams or individuals that a lot of companies are not giving out goals to their salespeople?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm finding
they'll give them. Yeah, they'll give them the annual target. This year you need to bring in X amount of money, and then go and do it. You know, it's almost like that. I've certainly had clients where that's the situation. where there's no real help for those salespeople internally, where they're not sort of guided about, okay, that's your new number this year. What are you going to do to achieve it? What stands in your way? Where are you right now? How are you going to bridge that gap? Because I had a client a couple of years ago where the sales team missed their target. Every salesperson, I think, missed their target. And then we're giving a new target, which is even a bigger stretch. Well, if they couldn't hit it there, why are they going to hit it here? What are they going to do differently? And those salespeople had no idea what they were going to do differently. So yeah, there's definitely.
Okay, I'm finding the same thing too. And in some areas, the company isn't even giving them goals. So salespeople, if you're listening to this and you're one of those people that, your boss hasn't given you sales goals, I always suggest, what do you want to make that year?
Yes.
How much do you want to make?
Yeah.
And then come to terms with what you want to make, and then figure out how much you have to sell, not just every quarter, but every month and then every day, in order to meet that income level that you want. So if you're not given goals, don't think you get a pass. Because you're only going to make what you sell. And I know some people have base and commission. That's the way I always sold. I always had a base and a commission. But even when companies that I worked for gave me a sales goal, I would always figure out, well, what do I want to make this year? And that was my real goal, right? And when I had my real goal higher than the corporation goal, not every year I didn't make it, but I'll tell you what, I sure in the heck got a lot closer than I would have had I not made that personal income goal.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't have a target, you're not going to hit it. You just don't know which direction to go in. And what you've just described there was almost exactly the conversation I had with a new salesperson that I was coaching recently. He was commission only, working freelance for a company, and I said, "Oh, what target have you agreed with the company?" And he said, "Well, I haven't yet agreed it." I said, "Well, how much do you want to make?" And exactly what you said. You've got to have a target. Often in a sales training room, I'll ask somebody to stand up. I'll scrunch up a ball of paper, give it to them, and I'll draw a target on the wall, and I'll say, "I want you to throw the ball and hit the target." And just as they're about to throw it, I'll say, "Oh, hang on, stop." I'll turn them round. Now they're not facing the target. Then they've got to try and throw it over the shoulder. And if you can't see the target, you're not going to hit it. So yeah, so I'm always a bit nervous. I think, oh, what if they do hit it? It really knocks that example, that metaphor out. But you can't. You're not going to hit it consistently. And consistency is the key to sales, as we know. So yeah, absolutely.
All right. What's the next one, Simon?
You've got to have all the right people in the room. If there's really
that's a big one.
Yeah, it's you've got to really understand the buying process of the organisation. What do they have to go through if the person you originally start the conversation with wants to progress this? What has to happen next? Who do they have to bring in get involved? Who has to sign it off? The person who signs it off, what level of information do they need? Are they very much financial? Are they operational? Do they want detail? Are you going to have to do a different kind of proposal for them? Do you need to meet them? When do you have to meet them? What is that action plan? And I think it's you've got to have them all in the room, because a non-decision maker, an influencer, can only say no. They can't say yes. So you've got to meet everybody. And a really nice technique, I'm sure you do the same with your clients, is to get the client or get the salesperson and their prospect to go, okay, when does this need to happen by? Let's get a date where you want this project, whatever, implemented. And write that, get a post-it and stick that on the wall, 1st of September, okay? And we put on the other side, 6 feet apart, today's date. Okay, what do we have to happen in the meantime? Give them the red post-its, you have the green post-its, and they start planning out what they have to do from their side. You start putting on what has to happen, and you're doing it collaboratively. You're working together to this goal, and they'll go, well, yeah, we need to raise a purchase order. For us to do that, we've got to get this person involved, and all of a sudden you've got a wall full of post-its, and now you've got a plan, and you can hold each other accountable for these things. We agreed that by August the 1st, you will have said this, that, and the other, or you will have got this, or you would have got this information to us. So, got to have as many of the right people in the room as you can possibly get, ideally all of them. And it might not be all at the same time, but the advantage of what we've got right now is there is no excuses. If you've got Zoom or Teams or whatever video conferencing setup you've got, or just a phone, you can have people in the room. You don't logistically, you don't have to get everybody in a physical room, but they have to all be on board, and you need to know who they are, who they report to, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and the other thing too, Simon, is I always tell people, you got to find out who signs the checks.
Yeah.
Because that's who you also need to develop a relationship with. Because if you're working with a decision maker that doesn't have the authority to approve something that is, over his budget a little bit, you got to find out who that next level is. Because a lot of times these middle managers, they feel like they're at risk when they bring on a new vendor into the company, and they don't want to look bad to their boss.
Yeah.
So they'll pretend that they have the final decision just because they want to control that situation. And you'll have that sometimes, and sometimes you don't. I mean, you've got middle managers that are very secure in what they do. But if you've got a middle manager that seemed gun-ho at first, and now he's kind of walking things back, that's the first clue that he may not be the one that signs the checks. Yeah. So you may need to find out who that is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great advice there. Absolutely. Yeah, you need to know who's doing it. And that also kind of leads on to that, is the salesperson asking the difficult questions? Because sometimes the salesperson doesn't want to rock the boat. They don't want to challenge too much. They just, want to kind of just pretend that everything's going to go well, and they don't ask difficult questions. They don't find out what could possibly derail the opportunity. A very quick example. My wife was buying a car at the weekend, and she said to the car salesperson, he said, well, what's your budget? And she said, oh, my budget is £200 a month. So he shows her a car which was £200 a month, and he was looking at some paperwork to arrange the test drive, and she goes, yeah, that's too expensive. I said, but you told him it was £200 a month, and he's come with a car that's £200 a month. She goes, yeah, too expensive, and the boot's too small. Our trunk, the boot we call it, is too small. I said, well, tell him. She goes, we call it a boot.
Oh, a boot.
You call it a trunk, we call it a boot. Yeah, and she goes, well, the boot's too small. He's not going to fit all the stuff in that we need. I said, well, tell him. She goes, oh, no, I won't mention it. I will test drive the car. So this guy thinks he's potentially getting a sale, but she's got no intention of now buying it. We say buyers are liars, and she's not doing it on purpose, but she doesn't want confrontation and all the rest. Now, so he could have asked a challenging question. So if he'd have asked her, it didn't matter what the exact wording would have been, but if he'd have said something along the lines to her of, if you had a magic wand, what one thing would you change about that car? That would have been a really easy thing for her to say, oh, I wish the boot or trunk was slightly bigger. And then he could have said, well, actually, maybe that model's not the right model for you. Let me take you in and show you a different model or whatever. But he went in there blind. So he went and test drove it yesterday. She had no intention of therefore of buying it, because the trunk was too small, and therefore she's now looking at a different car from a different dealership. Not all because he didn't ask the right question, but he could have asked a question to really understand whether there was anything that was a problem.
That's a great example, Simon. It really is. And it's a good example on both sides. What the buyer or what the salesperson, how he could have asked better questions and how the buyer will, not intentionally not reveal what they really want, but coming into a sale of kind of like, I'm just looking around, but here's what I'm looking for, and then leaving and going somewhere else and getting what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good example as well. I don't know what you call it in America, but sort of behavioral styles where you have different colors for different personality traits. And my wife's personality would be one where she doesn't want confrontation. She doesn't want to be pressured. She doesn't want to be sold to. She'll help her buy, but don't put her under pressure. So when she went back there yesterday to test drive this car, she then had two salespeople going, oh, what's it going to take for you to say yes today? And all of a sudden, as soon as you put her under pressure, that's it. She will not buy. So yeah, they also shot themselves in the foot as well by putting her under too much pressure. They didn't. Yeah. We need. If you say yes today, we'll also throw in £500 worth of. That's it. She wasn't going to be rushed, and therefore they lost. Yeah, she lost. That rapport and trust was gone.
So I'll tell you my car story. Whenever I go buy a car, I go in old jeans, a sweatshirt, and no makeup, my hair pulled back, right?
Yeah.
So I'll walk into the showroom and look at these cars that I know, a specific car I want to buy, and no one will approach me.
Yeah.
Because they automatically assume I can't afford it. Yeah. And I do that on purpose just to see what kind of reaction that I'm going to get, and this as a salesperson too, Simon, you're looking to see which ones really care.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Which one doesn't just see a big dollar sign on your head.
Yeah, it's interesting that because, if Richard Branson or somebody like that or Bill Gates, if they were going into a car showroom, they would be wearing jeans and they would be wearing a jacket. And I know I've seen photos of Bill Gates wearing a £10 Casio digital watch, so they don't look the part necessarily. Yet they're the ones with all the money. But it's the person who turns up to buy a car, maybe in a suit and tie. You think, well, can they really afford that Lamborghini? So yes, it's difficult to make that. 7 seconds, isn't it, to make a first impression? So it's people sort of that unconscious bias comes in very quickly. But no, it's interesting.
Yeah, and here's another story of how on why you should not prejudge by the way the buyer looks. Okay, this was back in the days when I sold life insurance and annuities and things like that. So I was given a lead. They gave it to me because nobody wanted to go down inner city Indianapolis to take this lead because they thought it's a waste of time. So we'll give it to Christine.
Yeah.
And honest to God, Simon, I walked into this home and there was a dirt floor. There was no flooring, no carpeting, and I had no idea there were homes in Indianapolis with dirt floors. So I decided I'm just going to treat her like I would if I was driving up to a mansion, so I did. And after I answered all of her questions and we went through the different types of policies, she said, well, just wait here, honey. And I thought, oh gosh, what's going to happen now? And she comes back with $20,000 in cash and wanted to pay for this life insurance policy. And I said, well, I can't take cash. I'll need to take you to the bank and have you, draw up the money order for this. And that's the only way that I can take this. So I took her to the bank and she got her money order or her cashier's check for $20,000 so she could buy the beginning of this life insurance policy that I think she paid up for like 5 years or something like that. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's an example of don't prejudge.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
And
my
we all,
favorite
yeah.
story.
Yeah, it's a brilliant one. It's a brilliant one because salespeople do prejudge in
Hmm.
all sorts of ways.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, Simon?
Oh, I think it's the big one. Not asking for the order, not closing, not asking, would you like to proceed, or whatever words. And I don't know whether it's still available, but I know that there's been lots of books that you could buy on Amazon or wherever, sort of things called like, the 100 greatest sales closes, all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, it's the same 10 repeated in slightly different ways and stuff. Um, for me, I'm less bothered about what you actually say, the fact that you actually do say something. It's not really about wordplay as much, but just asking, are you ready to make a decision? Is this something you want to proceed with? It doesn't matter. I'm not really fussed about the words as much, but just ask it. Don't have the end of the meeting and then it just sort of drift off and then get back into your car and drive back to your office and go, you know what, I didn't ask for the order. Because sometimes all you've got to do is ask. And they'll say yes, because you've gone on a journey with them. And sort of equal to that is, did you actually test close it? Did you trial close it at some point or a few points throughout that selling process? Is this what you're hoping to see today? In your opinion, will this solve your problem? Whatever it is, but are you asking those kind of questions? Because you don't want to get to the end of the meeting, or the end of the sales process, which could have gone on for weeks or months, to find out that actually, no, they don't want to proceed. They've just been kind of, tagging you along a little bit. So yeah, ask for the order.
Yeah, you want to, all through the sales process, you want to gain acceptance.
Yeah.
And by checking in to make sure that you're both on the same page to move the sale forward. I mean, I've had salespeople say to me, well, how did it go? How did it go? How did you close the sale? Well, I just didn't get the feel that it was the right time. Well, did you ask?
Yeah. It's just making assumptions again, isn't it? You've got to ask. Rather than make an assumption, just ask.
Right.
They can always say no. And sometimes, you want a yes, and no will do. You just don't want to be strung along with maybes and whatever. So yeah, just ask for the order. There is.
Excuse me, Simon. Do you think the reluctance to ask for the sale is because they are trying to avoid one more rejection?
Yeah, I think people are scared of hearing no. They take it personally, and it's never personally. It relates to, maybe that person didn't have a need. Did they really have a need? Was there urgency? Was there a compelling event driving the reason for whatever that purchase potentially would have been? But I think people are scared of hearing no. They've kind of almost feel like they're almost got kind of a relationship with that prospect, and they've maybe had many phone calls and many meetings, and they don't want to hear the word no. And the buyer doesn't want to tell them no, so they kind of string it along, and at some point someone's going to have to do something. Maybe the buyer will say, sorry, my boss has made the decision not to proceed, just to protect them, let them down,
Or what will happen is the buyer will go dark, and the salesperson will start wondering, well, what's going on? He's not returning my phone calls. He's not, answering my emails. And that's because you didn't ask and he's moved on, or the competition has come in and just swooped in on that deal and you lost it. I'll just finish with this, Simon, because we're at our 30-minute mark. I had someone say to me one time that had I continued to follow up with her, she would have bought with me. But I followed up with her for over 2 years. And I sent a final voice message and email. And that's another big mistake that salespeople don't do. And we'll talk about that the next time. I'm going to write that down so I don't forget. But I ran into her at a networking meeting like 2 years later, and she said, well, had you followed up with me for another year, I would have bought with you. And I wanted to say, oh, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Followed up with you for 2 years. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't buy that stuff, guys.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I don't know if it's in the EU, the term is in America or not. In the UK, we call it ghosting, when someone goes dark or stops returning your phone calls. And I think it's the most unprofessional thing. If you don't want to work with somebody, just send them a quick email. Thanks, but no thanks. That's it. I hate it. Hate it if that happens.
Well, I do too. Now, next time, I'm going to give you some tips about how to stop following up and what to say, because it's really, really good, Simon. So I want you guys to make sure you look for our next video. And Simon, I really, really appreciate this time with you. You always have such a good way to express how to help salespeople, and I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you, Christine. It's always a pleasure. There's so much we can talk about on this subject. I think we could write a book on it together.
Yeah, we should do that. That'll be next, everybody. All righty, bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.